Okay, so for my assignment in health psychology, I chose the topic of treatments for children with social anxiety, particularly that stutter. And the reason I chose this was because a bit of a personal one. I had a stutter growing up, and I still kind of do, and I just thought it would be interesting to investigate how that affects social anxiety and the treatments that can be found for it. So, what is stuttering? Stuttering is the disfluency in speech, basically. It can be displayed in multiple ways: repetition, prolonged sound, blocks, and it's not as obvious as saying, how is your day? It can be in blocks where, how is your day? And how stuttering is displayed can vary on multiple factors, which I won't be getting into. Okay, so Briley et al. 2019. In this article, it was a review. Wait, sorry, not this one, the following ones. But in this one, Briley et al., they got the information of from the National Health Interview Survey. This is American, by the way, not Australian. And they got 48,000 children, 48,319 children, and 503 of those children had stuttering, children with stuttering CWS. And what they found was, regardless of the age group, the children with stuttering were more likely to report worries, unhappiness, slash depressed, slash tearful feelings, and having difficulties with emotions in children without stuttering. Children with stuttering were also less likely to be well behaved and less likely to have good attention and complete chores than children with no stuttering. And just want to reiterate, the social well-being, emotional well-being, and behavioral well-being seems to be correlated with stuttering in children. Okay, so the prevalence of social anxiety in children who stutter. Basically, out of the children who stutter, approximately how much of them would have social anxiety? In IVRACH 2016, these are Australian children now. There was a stuttering group where there were 75 children, average age of 8. Control group, 150 children, and they came from various sources. If I remember right, it was from all sorts of advertisements. And the onset of stuttering occurs between 2 and 5, and this is also when speech and language skills are developing. And there was a series of questionnaires. These questionnaires included ones included questionnaires where the parent was also involved. So, anxiety scales, strength and difficulties questionnaires, short mood and feelings, personal experiences, right? Cultural bullying scale, I can see that one right there. And compared to the non-control group in the post-treatment, why am I talking about post-treatment? There was no post-treatment. It was just a questionnaire. Anyways, the studying group had six-fold increase odds for social anxiety disorder, 24% to 5%. And they also reported any anxiety disorder, 32% in studying group is compared to the 10.67% in the control group. And in ratings for speech-related items in the culture bullying scale, such as, for example, one of the items was other kids would bully me for my speech. So there would be higher significant ratings in the studying group for that, and also hyperactivity, inattention, and emotional symptoms. Is that it for this one? Yes. All right, and this is a development of social anxiety. This is the one that was a review by Spence and Rappi, 2016. And what we see is genes, temperament, proximal factors, environmental factors that contribute towards the level of social anxiety. This is a review, so they did reference plenty of randomized controlled trials, but I did not cite them here. I'll just be more so reciting their what the point of the paragraphs were. So, and as I was reading, I also kept in mind, what can I relate to a child that has stuttering? I'll be talking about three factors particularly. The first one is safety behaviors. Now, safety behaviors is when someone avoids a situation that can be potentially anxious, and whatever behavior that they do, they just avoid it, and it's good for the short term. They don't get to experience that anxious moment, but bad for the long term because that prolongs, right? And you can imagine a child who is stuttering, who at that point or grows up to be in those type of situations with those type of avoidant responses. This also ties in with our poor social skills of not being able to be exposed and familiarized with different social situations. And the other factor I wanted to talk about was the parental influences. In the paragraphs of this review, they were talking about how parenting styles, and this from randomized trials too, how parenting style, encouragement, constructive coping techniques from parents towards the children can help the child um, be less exposed to increasing the level of social anxiety. And that would be it, unless I go back to it in the future slides. Okay. And two questions were in my head while I was thinking of what type of treatments for social anxiety in children who stutter would be appropriate, right? Well, what type of treatments would be appropriate? The first question was in my head, is treating a child stutter just as effective as treating the child's social anxiety? Like you might as well just cut out the middleman and just go straight for the source, which is the child stutter, right? And the answer that I find is possibly, but likely not. Because in this article by Menzies 2008, there were two groups, a CBT group and a control group. They were adults, not children, but still. And in the CBT group, post-treatment ratings, the CBT group scored higher on the Global Assessment Functioning Scale, which is basically psychological wellness, than the control group. But no significant differences in percentage of syllables stuttered. So basically, it's not like the CBT improved the stuttering or made it worse. It was the same. It was only the psychological wellness, and that's what I'm focusing on. Furthermore, Ivrache and Rappi 2014 recommends a mix of speech treatment and psychological treatment in clinical settings, the latter to engage with development and persistence of social anxiety disorder. And another question I had to myself was, should treatment encourage acceptance or management of stuttering? And why not both? Scott Yaris et al. Addresses the point of acceptance. Orders distinguishes the term from giving up. Acceptance is recognition, openness, and adaptiveness to the issue. Authors also suggest acceptance that can help children minimize contributing thoughts and behaviors that result in stuttering more, such as physical tension, avoidance, and struggle behaviors. Acceptance is central to mindfulness-based therapy as well, which I'll get into in the next slide. So here's the recommendations that I have, just going on from the last slide. Mindfulness-based therapy. Now, acceptance is something which I believe can be beneficial for children who have stuttering because it allows them to be more resilient, open-minded, and adaptive to the condition. Scott Yaris believes that for adults, it can actually improve the resilience and the mental health and quality of life of adults. And I do think that there might be promising signs that this can also relate to children with stuttering. There is limited research on the efficacy for this for social anxiety disorder, but in a research for 31 children post a tsunami in Sri Lanka, they were diagnosed with PTSD, and it had promising results on the PTSD symptoms. They had 6 sessions of meditation and relaxation, and the recovery rates were 71% by the end of it. So 71% of the 30, not the 31, but the children who were split up into this group, 71% of them recovered. And mindfulness could also allow a form of acceptance for children to speak freely and lessen that emotional, cognitive, mental strain that they might have from stuttering, which I mentioned in the previous slide in the development of social anxiety. And the other one is cognitive behavioral therapy. in this program called Being Brave, which was adapted to children because so they adapted it by adding factors of the parents being involved and using techniques that were age appropriate. And from the children, oh, I'm over 10 minutes. From the children who were over 64 children were randomized to a CBT group or a control group, and post-treatment rates of disorder were significantly greater in the control group than the CBT group for social anxiety. They also had high coping scores, and they had higher behavioral inhibition. And the references. And thank you for listening. I know I went over time, but hopefully not by much.